I stepped down from my job as CEO to focus in the last couple of years on a different kind of cancer. Not a biological cancer, but a cultural cancer that I worried threatened to kill that dream that Martin Luther King had 60 years ago, that threatened to kill the dream that allowed me to achieve everything I ever had over the course of my career. And the cancer came in two parts, and I'll go through each in turn. The first is the new secular philosophy, almost a secular religion in our country, that said that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation, full stop. That if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged. Crucially, no matter your economic background or upbringing, your race and your gender govern who you are, and even the thoughts and ideas you're allowed to have. And we began to live in a moment where any disagreement with that set of views then came to be labeled with terms like the R word, racist, and there being no greater damnation in modern America than to be called a racist, began to silence the free exchange of ideas in our country. Now, over that same period of time, you had the second element of this cancer, which was a new trend that emerged over the exact same period, which was a trend in the business world, a trend in our economy and in commerce, which said that the role of a business in society was not just to deliver a product and a service to a customer for the pursuit of profit, but also to advance other, potentially worthy, but other societal agendas along the way as well. Fighting climate change, systemic racism, and so on. Worthy social causes that government hadn't stepped up to the plate to address sufficiently in ways that private sector leaders had to do it instead. That is the new trend known as stakeholder capitalism, that a business must look after not just the interests of its shareholders, but also the interests of a more diverse array of so-called stakeholders. So it'll be familiar to you to remember that Milton Friedman had a concern about this 40 years ago, actually 50 years ago, in 1970. He wrote a famous essay in the New York Times Magazine and said that the social purpose of a corporation is to pursue profit. And his view is that the reason this philosophy was flawed was that it would cause businesses to be less effective at making widgets for profit, which in turn reduced the size of the economic pie for everyone along the way, and undermine capitalism's ability to deliver on its promise of lifting people up from poverty, capitalism being the best known system to mankind to lift people up from poverty. And I'll tell you, I agree with everything he had to say. But my principal critique of stakeholder capitalism is fundamentally different than Milton Friedman's critique of stakeholder capitalism. It is not that it is simply a threat to the economic promise of capitalism itself, but more importantly, that it is equally a threat to democracy. Because what this new system demands is that we no longer settle our political differences in a democratic body politic through free speech and open debate in the public square as citizens, where every person's voice and vote counts equally, but instead through economic force, where our viewpoints are adjusted upwards or downwards by the number of dollars that we control in the marketplace. That it is not the job of a citizen to decide how to address climate change or how to address historical racial injustice, but that it is the job of a corporate executive, probably the most powerful of whom sits on Park Avenue, but in other places too. It is the job of those corporate executives and the boardrooms and the institutional investors who influence those boardrooms to settle those political questions instead. And so my concern was less that this was just going to make companies less efficient, though I share that concern, but also that it was going to drain the lifeblood out of a healthy democratic body politic, where everyone's voice and vote counts equally, unadjusted by the number of dollars they control in the marketplace. And I further worried that it threatened democracy not just once, but twice over. Because part of the promise of capitalism in a democratic body politic is not just that it provides the economic means of delivering prosperity to its citizens, but also that it gives us one of those sacred spaces that bind us together across our otherwise irresolvable divides of partisan and identity politics. The private sector providing that sanctuary that Alexis de Tocqueville described 150 years ago when he traveled this country, and recognized that a diverse democracy is not supposed to stand on its own feet for more than a couple of generations. The laws of social nature don't permit that to happen in human history, but for the existence of what he called intermediating institutions, the kinds of institutions that provided a refuge from the otherwise inevitable human divisions in a diverse society. America was not supposed to work as a body politic, but for the existence of American capitalism, which provided the most lasting of those intermediating institutions. A place where it did not matter whether you were black or white or gay or straight or Democrat or Republican, when you came together to work and innovate together and invest together and prosper and make money together. You were not black, white, red, or blue. You were in the shared pursuit of green, back in the old sense of green, in the green sense of green pieces of paper. This is what united an otherwise divided body politic. And so what happened over the course of the last 10 to 15 years was that these two social forces, one social force in our culture that was sort of born in the academy as a way of challenging the prevailing orthodoxy, the so-called woke culture, merged with the force of stakeholder capitalism, another challenge to a prevailing Friedmanite orthodoxy. Those two challenges to their respective orthodoxies merged and became the new orthodoxy. The challenge to the system over the last 15 years became the new system.